module in the CTL Concepts and Course Design series. Module 2, Writing Learning Objectives. In this module, we shall be talking about and working with learning objectives. By the end of the module, you will be able to explain the role of organizing frameworks in the course design process, write general course descriptions that identify major course topic areas, create an organizing framework for a course based on an integrated topic hierarchy, knowledge, skill, and attitude approach, describe the characteristics of well-written learning objectives, compare and contrast poorly and well-written learning objectives, and write learning objectives in specific and behavioral terms. To start, it is recommended that learning objectives be written in a context of an organizing framework. An organizing framework creates the context to write learning objectives systematically so as to ensure learning objectives fully represent what is intended for a course. There are three types of organizing frameworks we shall describe: topic hierarchies, knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and a framework that combines the first two. The simplest organizing framework is the list of topics a course will cover, or what we have called a topic hierarchy. A topic hierarchy provides a list of organized headings that learning objectives can be written from. A topic hierarchy can start as a list of course content, but it is more than a mere enumeration. A hierarchy requires that the topics be sorted, sequenced, and grouped according to some meaningful specification. This sorting and grouping activity will refine a list of major contents into a course hierarchy. Starting to develop a topics hierarchy can be as simple as checking out the latest textbook to as involved as consulting internal or external experts. A lot of this has to do with how well the course is currently defined. Courses that are well established will have many resources available to support the creation of the hierarchy, whereas new or emerging courses may not. It should also be noted that while a topic hierarchy is a strong starting point for writing learning objectives, it alone does not facilitate differentiation of the types of learning that will occur. For that, the knowledge, skills, and attitude framework provides further clarification. The knowledge, skills, and attitudes framework is a very common framework for writing learning objectives. The KSA Framework differentiates between different kinds of learning experience. Is the point of the course to transmit information, or are there skills you expect students to develop? Alternatively, do you intend to inculcate an attitude or disposition in the student? Most courses have learning objectives that fit into all three of these broad categories. However, each course will differ in terms of where the ultimate emphasis is to be found. The topic hierarchy and KSA organizing frameworks have weaknesses when used on their own. However, when combined, clarity about the areas of learning that are covered and the types of learning experiences emerges. Combining the two frameworks simply requires that learning objectives be written according to knowledge, skills, and attitude for each of the identified topics in the course. While this method of developing a course hierarchy can be taken to a very precise level of granularity, the level of specificity is up to the faculty member. Whatever your preference, the point is to work with refining groups and ordering the topics until you reach a point where you can be to write learning objectives that define your course well. Having a clear and specific organizing framework is an important first step for writing course learning objectives. We can now shift focus to the act of writing learning objectives. A good working definition of learning objectives is statements of what the learner is expected to know, understand, and be able to demonstrate after completion of a process of learning. In other words, learning objectives offer a means by which attention can be focused on the actual achievement of students. Well-written learning objectives define what students will be able to do, are written in specific and behavioral terms, and define what and how to assess. With this working definition of learning objectives, it is clear that a well-formulated student learning objective is thoughtfully and precisely crafted. Consider the following examples. Each of these 4 objectives is written in specific terms with clear student behavioral expectations. Notice further how each is easily classified as a knowledge, skill, or attitude based on the starting verb. Student learning objectives need to be clearly delineated, and it is therefore best to avoid vague and ambiguous terms such as understand or know. Indeed, the action verbs are a key element of the learning objective. A well-selected action verb makes the expectations of the objectives transparent to the student in terms of activities and assessments and are the focal point of an aligned course. Here is a list of measurable verbs that may be useful in creating learning objectives. On the left, you can see 3 examples of poorly formulated learning objectives. What makes them poorly written is the lack of specificity. The 3 examples on the right all have a very precise instructions, including the time frame and the level of cognitive learning that the student will be required to demonstrate. For learning objectives to be useful in course design, it is necessary to strive for the greatest precision possible. The more precise the objectives, the easier it is to ensure that the other components of the course are aligned with each other and with the learning objectives. Vague or unclear objectives can often be improved, although not always, by unpacking the vague learning objective verbs. That is, parsing the general and vague formulation into a number of more precise and thus accessible student learning objectives. As you can see, the more precise objectives include the time frame and a clear expectation of what the student will be expected to do. These action verbs need to be congruent with in-class activities, homework, as well as the assessment and other course materials. But not all learning objectives are equal. Consider the 3 examples on the slide. They are all clearly formulated student learning objectives that, based on the verbs used in each, involve different levels of learning. The point to take away here is that learning exists on a continuum, from simple to complex. We use learning objective verbs to place learning objectives on this continuum. We have already introduced the concept of categorizing learning objectives based on knowledge, skill, and attitudes. While this framework is very helpful for characterizing the type of learning expected to occur in a course, it does not address the concept of learning as a continuum from less to more complex. In order to characterize learning objectives accordingly, that is, to different levels of complexity, we use taxonomies. There are many examples of learning objective taxonomies. The most well-known taxonomy originated in the 1950s and is called Bloom's taxonomy or pyramid of learning. Notice how the verbs in bold are the entry point into the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a widely used taxonomy that can add depth to how we describe learning in a given course. Having more clarity about the complexity of learning in a course enables better decisions about how to deliver and assess learning. Bloom's taxonomy is too specific a starting point for initial course design because it requires the course designer to differentiate between the different levels of learning. That said, it is recommended that this type of categorization take place after developed learning objectives have been formulated and based upon the knowledge, skills, and attitude approach. It becomes easier then to integrate the concept of Bloom's at this stage. To summarize, one very useful approach to developing learning objectives is to first generate an organizing framework to guide the writing of learning objectives. We recommend an integrated topic KSA approach to defining the organizing framework. It is important that learning objectives should be written in specific and behavioral terms. Well-written learning objectives can be classified based on learning taxonomies, such as Bloom's. Having a strong understanding of the learning objectives for a course is the foundation for good decisions about how to deliver and assess the course. Should you wish, generate an organizing framework for one of your courses. You can use the template provided, which integrates the KSA Framework into the topics hierarchy, or you can make one that meets the specific needs of your course. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that creating an organizing framework is an iterative process that should move you from an unrefined list of course learning objectives to a systematically organized hierarchy. There is likely to be a lot of movement as you develop more clarity about how your course is organized. There are a couple of final points about learning objectives that you might find useful, but were not directly related to this module's objectives. We include them here for your benefit. There is a complexity involved with the terminology surrounding learning objectives, outcomes, and goals. For consistency's sake, we use the term learning objective and operate under the assumption that learning objectives and learning outcomes are the same. With respect to learning goals, we consider these to be general aims or purposes of a course that are usually incorporated into the general course description. This list of references and other resources can be found in the Resources and Reference file in your E-class. And always feel free to contact the CTA.